You feel it before you hear it. A faint, hollow hum in the corner of your bedroom window. A gentle pressure change that makes the candle flame on your nightstand lean sideways. You pull the blanket up a little higher, the fabric soft against your chin, and listen. That low, rushing whistle outside isn't a storm, not quite. It's just the wind, finding its way through the trees and around the eaves. An invisible river of air with nothing to break it but the walls of your house. You lie there, warm in your pocket of stillness, while the world outside bends and sways. The sound is a lullaby now. It means you are safe, you are sheltered, you are separate from whatever is out. They're moving in the dark. But for 99% of human history, that sound meant the exact opposite. It meant your entire world was about to become a weapon. The wind wasn't outside your shelter. It was your shelter, whispering through grass, walls, tugging at hides stretched over poles. That huffing sound was the breath of the night itself, testing every seam and knot. For 200,000 years, our ancestors did not sleep through windy nights. They listened to them with a focus you have never needed, every muscle tuned to a single question. Is this the one? Is this the gust that finds the weak spot? Is this the sigh that carries the scent of our fire and us to the nose of something hungry downwind? The wind erased the world they knew. It stole the scent trails they used to hunt, scrambled the sounds they used to listen for danger, and turned their own campfire smoke into a choking, blinding fog. Every predator for miles. If even one of your direct ancestors had failed, they did not just huddle and hope. The archaeological record is clear on that. In sites from the coast of South Africa to the frozen plains of Siberia, we find the same evidence, repeated across hundreds of generations. On windy nights, they did something specific, something deliberate, and something that would look utterly bizarre to you in your modern bed. They didn't try to shut the wind out. They invited it in. The story doesn't start with a gale, but with a breath. Yours, right now. Inhale slowly through your nose. You feel the cool air travel down, your chest expanding. That air is doing two things. It's feeding oxygen to your blood, and it's carrying a universe of information. Tiny chemical particles, the scent of rain on pavement, the last trace of your dinner, the faint, clean smell of your own skin, are washing over a postage stamp-sized patch of tissue at the very top of your nasal cavity. That's your olfactory epithelium. It's a direct neural line to the oldest, most primal processing center of your brain. Before you think a smell, you feel it. Fear, attraction, disgust, memory, all can be triggered by a few airborne molecules. Now imagine that sensitivity, but dialed to a level you can't comprehend. Your ancestors lived in a world of scent. It was their news feed, their map, their social network, and their early warning system. A fresh scrape on a tree told a story of a passing herbivore. Its size, its health, how long ago it was here. The musky tang on a breeze could mean a lioness had just fed and was sluggish in content, or it could mean she was hungry and on the hunt. The difference was in the subtlety of the compound, a nuance your ancestors could literally taste in the air. They could track a single antelope across miles of savanna by dipping their heads to the ground, reading a scent trail you would swear was invisible. The world to them was a rich, layered text written in odor, and the wind was the page-turner. On a calm day, this was their superpower. They could control the narrative. They could move downwind of prey, approaching in a cone of silence, where their own scent was blown safely away from the animal's nostrils. They could circle around to check the wind direction before approaching a watering hole, ensuring they weren't walking into an ambush. The air was a static, readable field, but then the wind would pick up. First, it would scatter the scent trails, tearing the readable text into confetti and throwing it in every direction. The map would go blank. Then, it would start broadcasting. The fire they needed for warmth, for safety, for cooking, its smoke, rich with the smells of meat and people and ash, would now stream downwind in a thick, obvious plume. It was like lighting a signal flare. That said, dinner is served to every carnivore in the territory. Worse, their own human scent, the unique signature of their bodies, would be ripped from them and carried away. They couldn't smell what was coming, but anything out there could now smell them. And then came the sound, or rather, the lack of it. In the rustling, roaring wash of wind through grass and trees, the small, telling sounds vanished. The snap of a twig under a paw, the low growl of a predator settling into a stalking crouch, the warning chirp of a bird spotting movement. All of it was swallowed by the white noise of moving air. The world didn't just go dark, it went mute. This was the crisis. A band of 25 people, maybe 30, is in this situation. They are not in a cave. Caves were rare, and often already occupied. They are in a temporary shelter of branches, grasses, and hides on the open plain. The fire, their one piece of technology that keeps the dark at bay, is now betraying them. The children are awake, eyes wide, not from the noise but from the tense set of their parents' shoulders. The way the adults are all facing outward, not talking, just listening with their whole bodies. One person, an older woman with eyes that have seen 40 summers, ancient for that time, stares into the guttering flames. She feels the wind shift, and a gust drives smoke directly into the shelter. Everyone coughs, eyes watering. In that moment, she makes a decision that seems like madness. She doesn't tell them to build the walls higher. She doesn't tell them to put more hides up to block the wind. She tells them to take some down. This is where archaeology meets paradox. At site after site, from the remains of ancient hearths, we see a pattern that baffled researchers for decades. They would find the evidence of a shelter, a circle of post holes, stains in the soil from organic walls, a central hearth. And around that hearth, they would find a distinct, puzzling layer of ash and charcoal. That did not stay put. On calm nights, the ash pile is neat, contained. But on layers corresponding to windy periods, the ash is smeared. It's spread in thin, radial patterns away from the fire, as if it was deliberately scattered. Mixed with this ash are tiny fragments of burned bone, seeds, and plant matter, the debris of a meal, all distributed in a way that no natural wind blowing into a shelter would achieve. The natural assumption was that the wind had blown through a broken shelter, scattering the ashes. But the pattern was too consistent, found in too many different locations and climates, and the shelter post holes showed no signs of sudden collapse. These people were there for the duration. So what were they doing? The leading theory is as simple as it is counterintuitive. They were using the wind as a tool. By strategically opening seams in their shelter, they created controlled drafts. They weren't letting a hurricane in, they were guiding a breeze. And onto that guided breeze, they would sprinkle a pinch of ash from the fire, or crush a handful of strong-smelling herbs. They were creating a scent fence. Imagine that older woman again. She takes a dried, resinous piece of bark from a pouch, something that smells like sharp pine and medicine. She crushes it in her palm, then holds her hand in the drafted breeze flowing through the shelter. The potent smell streams out into the night, carried downwind in a concentrated ribbon. She's not masking their scent. That's impossible. She's overriding the local scentscape with something aggressive, something confusing. To a predator downwind, the clean, enticing signal of human is now buried under a loud, acrid, unfamiliar odor that smells like fire, bitterness, and warning. It's the olfactory equivalent of blaring static over a radio signal. Meanwhile, another draft, from another opening on the opposite side of the shelter, is being used for listening. By creating a focus channel for sound to enter, they could cut through the white noise of the general wind. They would lie down, their ears to that opening, and listen not to the roar, but to the sounds within the roar. A skilled listener could hear the difference between wind in tall grass and wind in grass that was being parted by a heavy body. But the most profound thing they did with that wind required no herbs, no ash, just their own voices. They would begin to hum, a low, droning, communal tone, pitched to ride on the specific frequency of the wind whistling through their shelter. They weren't just making music to calm the children. They were actively sonar mapping the dark, because the wind, when it interacts with solid objects, creates signature sounds. A steady hum through a narrow opening is one thing. But if a large, dense body, like a lion, moves near that opening, it subtly changes the airflow. The hum would waver or develop a new harmonic. A person whose entire survival depended on listening could detect that change. The communal hum was a living tripwire. If the tone from one side of the shelter changed, everyone would know, without a word, which direction the threat was approaching from. They had turned their greatest vulnerability into a sensory perimeter. The wind was no longer just a chaotic force they endured. It was the string of their bow, the carrier wave for their signals. They had domesticated the very thing that was trying to unmask them. But this delicate, active defense had a cost. It required constant, vigilant attention. Everyone had to be awake, engaged in their role, tending the scent draft, listening, maintaining the hum. There could be no deep sleep on a night like this. The energy expenditure was enormous. And so, the puzzle deepens. Why did they stay? If windy nights were so dangerous, so costly, why not simply move to a more sheltered location the moment the winds picked up? The answer lies not in the inconvenience of moving camp, but in what the wind was bringing them. They weren't just defending against a threat. They were waiting for a delivery. The delivery was not a thing, but a change in the very medium they lived in. The wind was resetting the board. Think of the calm, scent-rich world as a game with all the pieces fixed in place. Everyone knows where everyone else is. You are a predictable player on a known field, but a strong, sustained wind scours that board clean. It empties the savanna of its information. Predators lose their prey just as completely as prey lose their predators. Every creature is suddenly blindfolded. And in that universal blindness, opportunity opens. Your ancestors weren't just waiting out the danger. They were waiting for the moment of maximum chaos, the peak of the wind, because that was the moment of maximum cover. When the roar was loudest, that's when they would move. We see evidence of this in the stone tools left behind. At sites like Archaeology in Kenya, layers of sediment deposited during windy, arid periods contain a different kind of toolkit. The tools are smaller, more refined, and made from materials sourced from farther away. They aren't the heavy hand axes for butchering a large kill at camp. They are projectile points, blades, and delicate scraping tools, a mobile kit. These were the tools of a band on the move, prepared to travel light and far, and they coincide precisely with evidence of ancient windstorms. The strategy was as risky as it was brilliant. As the wind screamed, masking all sound, a hunting party would slip out of the shelter. They would move perpendicular to the gale, crossing the wind's path, so their scent was blown on a brief, passing gust, not a continuous stream. They weren't hunting by scent or sound now. They were hunting by memory and geometry. They knew where the watering holes were, where the game trails converged. They would move to a spot downwind of a likely area and simply wait for the wind to die, because it always does. The lull after a strong wind is the most information-rich moment on the savanna. It is silent. The scent trails are gone, but so is the masking roar. And every animal, predator and prey alike, emerges from hiding to reassess the world. They are confused, disoriented, and most critically, they are making noise. A zebra snorts, an antelope stamps its hoof, a lion exhales heavily. In the dead quiet after the wind, these sounds travel with shocking clarity. Your ancestors, already in position, would be listening for that exact symphony of reemergence, and they would strike in the window of calm, before the natural scentscape could re-establish itself and give them away. But as a smokescreen for their offense, the very condition that made them vulnerable at camp made them invisible on the hunt. But this still doesn't answer the core mystery. It explains how they survived windy nights, but not why they evolved to need them. The energy cost was staggering. The risk was existential. There must have been a reward so powerful it reshaped their very biology. And there was. It wasn't about food. It was about thought. The wind forced a specific kind of mental collaboration that no other circumstance demanded. On a calm night, watches could be rotated. One person could listen while others slept. The hum of the group was passive, relaxed. But on a windy night, the entire band had to become a single sensory organism. The person managing the scent draft had to coordinate with the listeners. The listeners had to communicate subtle auditory changes not with words. Words would disrupt the listening. The communal hum had to be maintained in unison, its tone constantly adjusted by ear to match the changing pitch of the wind through the openings. This was real-time, multi-channel collaboration under life-or-death pressure. Neuroscientists now believe that this exact scenario, repeated over hundreds of thousands of years, was a furnace for the human brain. It required the prefrontal cortex for planning, and the auditory and olfactory cortices, all while maintaining intense social cohesion. Failure meant death. Success meant another day to pass those very neural pathways onto their children. And we carry the wiring for that workout in our heads right now. It's why you can follow a complex conversation in a noisy room. It's why a faint, strange smell in your own home at night can snap you from deep sleep to hyper-alertness in a heartbeat. Your ancestors didn't just learn to endure windy nights. Their survival on those nights literally built the kind of attention you use to read a room, to sense a shift in mood, to focus amidst chaos. The evidence is buried in our own physiology. Consider the human ear. Compared to our primate cousins, our outer ears, the pinny, are oddly rigid and complex, with more folds and ridges. For a long time, biologists thought this was just an evolutionary accident. But research into acoustic engineering suggests these folds act as subtle baffles, helping us localize sound in chaotic, windy conditions. They aren't for hearing better in silence. They are for picking a single thread of sound out of the howl. Or take your sense of smell. Humans are famously poor sniffers compared to most mammals. We traded raw olfactory power for something else. A direct, superhighway connection between our smell receptors and the hippocampus, the seat of memory and context. A wolf smells meat. You smell a campfire and are instantly transported to a specific childhood night, complete with the feeling of safety and the taste of toasted marshmallows. That connection, smell to complex memory, isn't for tracking prey. It's for learning. It's for remembering that this particular acrid smell on an east wind, combined with that specific sound of grass rustling, meant a leopard was in the gully. The wind forced us to become brilliant associative learners, connecting disparate sensory clues into a life-saving story. The final proof isn't in bones or tools, but in the stars. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer groups, when asked to navigate long distances on moonless nights, they preferred to travel when the wind was up. Their explanation was that the wind, while masking sound, also cleared the air of dust and haze. It made the stars brighter, but more than that, the constant sound of the wind in their ears provided a rhythmic, sonic baseline. Their path, guided by the feel of the wind on their skin and the glittering, clarified sky above. The wind was their pacemaker and their compass. Your ancestors didn't conquer the windy night. They partnered with it. They listened so intently. They learned to hear the shape of the dark. They breathed so deliberately, they learned to write messages in scent. And in doing so, they wired your brain to find pattern in noise, meaning in chaos, and a strange, deep calm. So the next time you lie in bed, listening to that hollow hum in the window frame, you're not just hearing a weather phenomenon. You are hearing the echo of a 200,000-year-old conversation. Your ancestors didn't just solve the wind. They folded it into the blueprint of the human mind. And that legacy, that inexplicable urge to open a window, just a crack, when a storm is brewing outside, it's not just for fresh air. You are recreating the listening draft, the profound sense of focus you can find in a busy coffee shop, the white noise of chatter and machines somehow helping you concentrate. That's the wind's roar, transformed. Your brain isn't filtering it out. It's using it as a sonic blanket, a consistent baseline. Even the deep, wordless comfort of lying next to someone you love, listening to the syncopated rhythm of their breath in the dark. That is the descendant of the communal hum. It is a nonverbal, shared frequency that says, without a sound, asterisk I am here. You are not listening alone. Asterisk your nervous system reads that shared presence as the ultimate all-clear signal. This is why the sound of wind can be so emotionally bipolar for us. It can be the source of primal anxiety, a howl that triggers a low-grade alert in your spine. Yet, for that same reason, when you are safe and sheltered, that same sound becomes the most profound lullaby on earth. It is a lullaby you earned. The comfort is so deep precisely because the danger was so absolute. Your brain hears the wind and understands, at a level deeper than thought, that the threat is being managed. And this reframes perhaps the most common modern complaint about ourselves, our distractibility. We call it a flaw of the digital age, an inability to focus. But in the context of a windy night on the savannah, that trait looks utterly different. It is not a broken attention span. It is a panoramic, vigilant, multisensory awareness. It is your brain's default setting to monitor multiple channels at once. Sound, scent, the subtle pressure change on your skin, the emotional tone of the people around you. It's searching for the lion in the grass and finding only emails. The system is working perfectly, then suddenly loud with the wrong kinds of signals. That feeling of being overwhelmed, of having too much input, the scrolling, the pings, the headlines, isn't a sign that you are failing at modernity. It is the ghost of an ancient excellence. Your brain is built to integrate the rush of wind, the shift in a hum, the scent of ash, and the tension in a companion's shoulder, into a single, coherent story of safety or danger. It is the world's most sophisticated pattern integrator. Asking it to only focus on one spreadsheet cell is like using a symphony orchestra to play a single, steady note. The instrument is capable of it, but it feels like a tragic underuse. The wind outside your window tonight. But your ancestors didn't build a wall against it. They built a partnership. They stretched their own biology across it like a string and learned to play it. They turned a weapon into a tool, and a tool into an instrument. And in doing so, they composed the very firmware of your consciousness, your ability to listen deeply, to collaborate without words, to find signal in noise, is the first and final proof of home. So let the sound in. Listen to it not as weather, but as a testament. Every sigh through the eaves is a verse in an epic you inherited by right of survival. It is the sound of the world once trying to find you, and the sound of you learning, forever, how to be found only on your own terms. That lullaby you hear isn't the world leaving you alone. It's the world whispering back the secret your family spent 200,000 years learning. You were never supposed to sleep through the wind. You were supposed to understand it.